Not that this is what he was bitching about.
Okay.
Dog shit money.
Oh shit! I didn't get the new intro ready. I'll do that next time.
It's got the volume.
Oh yeah.
There you go.
Okay, cool.
I don't need to hear me talk on a 5-second delay. What was I saying? Oh yeah, thanks, Echo, from 5 seconds ago.
Oh yeah.
Gathering of the Struggalos. Real music played by real musicians. I want someone to define fake music for me. So well stated.
All right, there we go.
Got a notification that we're live.
And we're live. All right. Your music is bad. You should feel bad. I'm not gonna watch us on delay.
Then I actually could see how woke I was because it was on a delay.
All right. What topic would I? Yeah. So, all right. So first off, update: Gathering of the Juggalos.
Yeah. So
We have an inside operative.
So it happened. That was an achievement. So we talked about this on the last episode. We watched the infomercial, which was hilarious. And as some people are expecting, Oklahoma, it's not really. I have a hilarious way that I want to say this, but I don't think I should. The police presence was apparently, so again, a lot of this stuff is hard to verify, and some of it I just didn't care. It's because it's funny enough unverified.
Yeah.
Oh wait, so this was Music Wars.
Oh yeah,
because
totally.
Speculating
Hashtag
wildly.
Music Wars.
Hashtag Music Wars. So are you gonna play that?
No, because I also didn't load that up, even though I made a better one. But
So apparently there were 75 undercover cops there, which I totally don't believe that number, but I do believe that there were undercover cops there. So there were few things up front about being in Oklahoma, because this thing had never been in Oklahoma before. It was there was like a 9 p.m. noise curfew, which people in the group, like a lot of people didn't understand what that meant, and they thought it was like a 9 p.m. curfew. Like you had to be in your tent or something. It's like, no, you're like not supposed to have a concert. But I don't think that got very strictly enforced. And then there was, Oklahoma's notorious for their very strict drug laws, which I think was the major issue. And then I guess there was also something about, like, they were supposedly cracking down on public nudity, which, like,
yeah.
I mean, I'd probably be kind of thankful for
Right?
that. But anyway, so the most obvious thing is like a fair number of people got arrested. So from the way people were talking about it in the group, it sounded like tons of people were getting busted, and from things ranging from possession to like some dude, you know, shined a laser pointer at the police helicopter, which is like a federal offense or something. I don't remember. So anyway, but then later, okay, and so the stories that was coming out on the group as this stuff was happening was that like everyone was getting like $20,000 bond, and then some dude got like a $75,000 bond or something. But then there was an article that came out like the day after the fest that said only 8 people got arrested. So I was like, okay, because it sounded like a ton of people got arrested. And then I also heard a report that 4 of the artists just didn't show, but I don't know which ones.
Yeah.
Like, we know POD made it though, because I watched that video, and they were super boring. And then, but then I guess one of the other things is it's really hot in Oklahoma at the end of July, and I guess like a number of people had like heat stroke and shit because it's like you go somewhere and you do a bunch of drugs, like you're probably not prepared to be out in the heat in the first place, but then you do a bunch of substances that interfere with your body's ability to regulate its temperature. So I guess there were some issues with that, and just in general, like some people left early because like they didn't want to get arrested. And just in general, like it was, again, it goes back to like the hilarious stuff that goes on in this group, because it was, you know, there was a bunch of people being like, oh, I'm so glad I didn't go because it sounds awful. And then other people being like, yeah, this was like the worst one ever. Like Gathering the Juggaloes is finally dead. And then there were all these other people who were like, I had tons of fun and fuck everyone who didn't go. You're not true fam. Like it's this constant weird thing about like families there for each other unconditionally, except on the following conditions. And then, but then sort of like, this was actually probably my favorite thing that occurred was somebody, so they have these seminars. So I don't think we talked too much about this because I feel like this infomercial that we watched last episode was light on this, but previous infomercials have been pretty heavy on the fact that they have seminars. And it's like, who is gonna be there that it's like, what kind of advice could they give? Yo, if you stick to the rap game, like you might get famous and make a bunch of money. It's like, that's kind of like a throw of the dice. Anyway, so they had one with ICP, and you know, they were talking about like, I guess people were like, hey, you know, we really don't like it being here in Oklahoma. This isn't good. And they were basically like, yeah, but like no other place will book us because like you guys destroy everything. Like this was literally the only company that we could find to rent us porta potties because like they don't want to get them all back all fucked up and covered in graffiti. And the group was like, yo, why didn't they tell us that before the fest? Because then maybe we wouldn't have fucked up the porta potties. And it's like
you have to be notified not to vandalize things because maybe.
But it's like. There's so much I could say, but I feel like our audience is intelligent enough that I don't need to say any of it. But that basically sums it up for me. Those are my comments.
Yeah. Well, and then I remember you saying there was like talk about how it has to move every year, and they're like, part of the reason it has to move is because no one will have us back.
No, that one guy was saying, he's like everybody that thinks it's so bad, whatever, you just don't understand. That's the nature of a carnival. And I was like,
that's right.
And I was like, so no, it's that no one wants you back. And then right, and so then there was like this weird confusion about that, and like the central tenet of your subculture is that you're outcasts. So you should be prepared for this, I would think. Like, it was so weird. But that was the most hilarious thing. Was it's like, no, that's the nature of a carnival. It's like, well, then how come it was in the same place for 7 years in a row until basically the feds told you not to come back? Like, again, hashtag music wars. This is all wild speculation. And like, third-hand info at best at this
Hey.
point.
We got the inside word. Got a man on the inside. Can't say anymore. I don't want to blow his cover. Let's see. Bob already likes your music. Did he like unlike us or something?
Yeah, I don't know.
All right, whatever, Bob.
It's the internet. Thanks, Bob. We appreciate
Bob.
your support.
We do appreciate your support.
I don't even know what country he's in. Is he watching the show from Austria?
Oh, I don't know.
I don't know if he's back yet. They went on like Speaker Factory tour.
Nice.
Looked pretty.
All right. So our second
cool.
topic. There's some things we wanted to talk about, and they now perfectly tie into an event we went to yesterday. There was here. Let me properly address what this event was. We went to the Sonos store in Soho, which I believe is a wireless, like, stereo system. Basically, it's like speakers and a receiver, and it's wireless. But when they first came out, it was, I believe, the first streaming service, because their whole deal was like, you buy our speaker dealies, and then you like get all the music you want, but like it wasn't really a thing yet, and so it didn't catch, theirs didn't catch on. Also, because they were like forcing you to buy like pick one, you know. And now
Right.
they obviously
Yeah.
were like, okay, we're not getting the streaming thing, so we just do speakers now, which makes sense, because otherwise you don't think they would host an event talking about vinyl. So
Right, because they want to sell you hardware.
Right, and I was like, isn't this counter to? But now it's like, no, you want to listen to that vinyl on our weird Wi-Fi speakers, which sounded like shit the entire time we were there. But that might have been because they were constantly playing like Slayer. And,
Well, no, that was we show up
right,
and they're playing, and the whole thing is supposed to be about like, oh man, isn't it so awesome to listen to stuff on vinyl? And they're playing a Slayer record from the 80s.
Yeah.
And you're just like, if there was ever something I was going to use to show off the fidelity of a sound system,
Yeah.
it would not be thrash, let alone Slayer from the 80s. It would be like solo cello,
right,
or
or
like
Steely Dan.
full symphony orchestra. Yeah, or Steely Dan.
Which is funny because I'm fairly confident now that the first time I heard Steely Dan was at a Comp USA in the Creative Labs display, because they used to play Josie. There would be like 4 buttons to hit for different music samples,
Yeah.
and different speaker selections. And one of them was, I didn't even know what it was, but it was so like funky and swanky that I just thought it was both awesome and hilarious. And then like years later, I was like, oh, it's Josie. So of course it was a track from Asia that was on like the default speaker testing track. And also it was like, you were like, yeah, these speakers, pretty fucking smooth. Okay, so this was Metal Sucks and Metal Injection along with Sonos, and it was called Metal on Vinyl, and it was hosted by Alan Douches? His name's spelled Douches.
I think they call him
Douche?
Douchey. I think they call him
Douche?
Douchey.
Oh, really? Okay.
Or just Deuce.
Oh, that makes sense. Of West Side Music, which I believe is a mastering studio, although it might
Yeah.
be mixing too.
No, yeah, it's a mastering lab.
And the frontman of Mutoid Man, Stephen Brodsky, and so it's basically a panel, but like, you know, a panel with 2 people on it.
Right.
I thought there was gonna be. I was
Yeah,
like,
they
it's
said,
a panel, right?
They
So
said panel, and it was
where's the rest of the?
They said 2 people, and then additionally they said, if you have questions, just shout them out. But the thing is, there wasn't a ton of time.
Right.
Like they were still, I wouldn't say mid discussion. They were nearing the end, but they could have kept going, and they were like, all right, Frank's like, all right, guys, we're out of time. So there wasn't really any question, wasn't really a panel, but whatever. I was actually impressed because I thought, as you said, it's the lead dude from Mutoid Man, who are like the best marketed metal band in New York, and I totally thought this was going to be like a thinly veiled advertisement for their album. Like I thought it was going to be way more about. So, and when you listen to the new Mutoid Man on vinyl,
Well, yeah, didn't he say
just
they got
sounds
it on
amazing.
vinyl? Because like, and he was like thrilled, but it was like,
But he
he should have overemphasized like the availability of said vinyl.
well,
Although there was other, I mean, a lot of things he should have overemphasized. But so okay, so like the basic. First of all, it's just the title of the event is just Metal on Vinyl. So I was kind of trying to gauge what they were actually trying to say, or what the point was, where do they stand on it? You know, what is your favorite physical music disc?
So there was a lot of ways this could have gone, and like I said, I was expecting an ad for Mutoid Man. It was instead an ad for that dude's mastering lab.
Right, and
That's
specifically
what it was.
their analog mastering lab, and how if you want your shit on vinyl, you need to pay for the separate vinyl mastering, which is not necessarily wrong. It just it's like we'll get to it. It comes around.
He went over a lot of stuff that are good points that people forget, right? Like the fact that when you do a vinyl master, you ride the faders. Like that's a thing you do, right? And
you have to do it the old way.
And I mean, you could actually do a full automation. Like you could write the automation and then do it, whatever. But you know, no one's gonna do that. But but this was like, I actually don't even know where to begin with this thing, because I took more. I literally
You like wrote down everything you said.
I took more notes from this than I've ever taken from anything we've ever gone to, because the hits just kept coming.
Right. Well, the first thing I have written down is in quotes, how do we make vinyl sound good? And I'm like, wait a minute. I thought you were here to tell us it sounded good.
It sounded good, like
so. Like, okay, so from what I remember, when they started off, it was about the mistakes people made. How there's some people are starting to realize that simply slapping your digital recording on vinyl is not going to make it sound like what you think vinyl sounds like. And so his response is, you know, we built this whole analog mastering studio to offer it now, but people aren't taking advantage of it. Like, we can't even give the time away. Blah blah blah. But then at the same time, he went into just what a huge pain in the ass that is. Like you said, writing the faders, everything has to be done in real time. It's a live performance of the master. And he also describes how that also used to be how mixing had to go. But the thing is, like, every time we got into something like this, you would really lose track of what his point was, because he would just start to drift off into nostalgia dreamland and just be like, and you know, you'd had this guy writing these ones, and we'd all have to do it together, man. Like and you really care about your mix, right?
So this is going to be a central theme of this episode for some stuff we're going to talk about later. Is this concept of real, right? And so he kicked it off with this anecdote about, and I apologize. I was gonna look this up, and then I totally fucking forgot. So he told a story about a band that he wouldn't name, and I was gonna try to figure out who the band was, and then I just forgot to go look it up. And honestly, though, I feel like I wouldn't have been able to figure it out. So he said there was a metal band from like upstate New York, or he said the Hudson Valley. Yeah. And what they did was they wanted to put out an album on vinyl. And they were so convinced that no one was going to actually listen to the vinyl record. Like, people just wanted to own the physical music disc.
Right.
That that they went to, like, all the record stores, you know, because, like, I don't know if people, maybe people who listen to this podcast know this, but I feel like a lot of people don't know this. If you go to record stores, they have, like, crates of, like, no-name vinyl, because everybody always thinks about, like, oh, I want to go get Donna Summer on vinyl, or I want to go get Van Halen on vinyl.
Right.
But there's, like, all this stuff where it's, like, somebody from a TV show that you don't remember, or, like, so-and-so's church sing-along. Like, there's all this vinyl that it's literally, like, 10 for $1, or, like, you know, it's just like load up. Yeah. And so they went and they bought all the cheap vinyl that they could, and then they just printed a label, and so they put their sticker on the thing, and then just put them in new sleeves. And the idea was they're like we need to sell discs that say that they're ours,
and
don't actually contain any music. Right, and you get a download card.
So you download, and they assume people are just going to download it and put the vinyl, like, on their wall or some shit.
Yeah, and what he was saying was, he goes, another, like, weird nostalgia thing, he's like, okay, you remember in the late 80s, when CDs came out, not everybody had a CD, right? And so it was one of these deals where if somebody said, you know, maybe check out this band, whatever, and you probably didn't care. Again, he's saying, like, as someone working in the industry. And he's like, but if it was like, oh, they have a CD, oh, that's how you knew they were a real band. Like, okay, these guys had the support and access to whatever to make a CD, like they're a real band. Yeah. He's like, these days, if you have a real you're a real band if you have vinyl. Like that's what distinguishes you being a real band. And I was just kind of like, I don't know about that. I'm like real in what sense?
Right.
Because like, does Bieber have vinyl? Does Katy Perry have vinyl?
You know, that's a good question, because I wonder if because for certain types of acts, it's become a thing.
Yeah.
Like, again,
But I
if you're
don't
in a
feel like
band-
it's
but
ones that are profitable.
Right,
I don't feel like it's a thing
I
amongst
feel like-
bands that are profitable.
Right, because they're fans. Like, who's right? There's probably
If you're in a metal band, right, I could totally see
your
that being
weird,
like,
your weird, the weird music fetishism of like rock and metal bands is not the same probably as people who are really, really into pop. So it's like they're a lot less to be like, this Justin Bieber track is so lit, but really, I need to hear it on a turntable. Like, I don't think
it
that
just doesn't have the warmth.
Yeah.
That synth bass punch doesn't have the same
Right.
warmth unless it's on vinyl.
Yeah. Okay, let me see. I've got. Okay, so one of my favorite parts is when he starts going to. This is what kept happening. This is like a roller coaster of, I get where you're going with this. Wait, what? And then stop selling, because usually he's making some point that is like
He would
moving
contradict.
backwards.
He would constantly
Right.
contradict himself.
Constantly contradicting. So my favorite is he starts going into.
Well, they talked about the physical limitation. They're
Right.
talking about like they're setting up the differences between things.
Right.
And they're saying like, you know, vinyl only has like a 50 dB
30,
dynamic range.
so it's 30 dB for vinyl, and then digital is about 90 dB, so it's about 3 times as much dynamic range. And that's where I was like, stop selling. Like, what are you, because you're like, they're saying about how, like, they're talking about the loudness war.
Right.
And
oh my
how,
God. The thing is, it's all so contradictory.
Right.
This
This is-
literally anything we bring up, it's going to be another thing. It's just
So he's trying to say how the loudness war, which is primarily started with CDs, but has really any digital format now, and it's just trying to squeeze the maximum volume you can.
Right. The trick for people
Before
who don't know, the idea is if you are listening to a bunch of things, so it doesn't matter if you're listening to the radio and it's song after song, or if you're watching TV and it's like, you know, something in the background of a commercial, whatever, or if today you're listening to a playlist and it's song after song. The idea is that if you have this on in the background, because this was another theme of the thing, is that people do not pay attention to your music.
Yeah.
This is all for putting it on in the background. If everything is a certain level and then one thing is all of a sudden louder, that's going to get your attention.
Yeah.
And so the idea was like, you got to have the loudest thing to get the kids' attention.
Yeah, and which they then immediately. Okay, so here's, before I forget it, there's the immediate contradiction, is that, you know, they talk about how they do that with commercials and stuff, but then I think they were saying TBS realized that if they made the commercials the same volume, people didn't get annoyed and walk away from the TV or skip it, and they were more likely to actually leave the commercials on.
Right. So well, not only that, right? Because there's this whole thing. People, you may remember, like, it used to be like that. Whenever the local commercials would come out, they'd be like so loud, right? And there's actually a federal law about program volume now, about like you can't, it's illegal to do that. But what TBS found was, they did this study, was they realized that if the program level stayed consistent, people would stay tuned longer, right?
Yeah.
So it wasn't just watching the commercials.
Right.
It was just that, like, you wouldn't notice, oh, it's a commercial now, I'm going to change the channel.
The point is, right, there's no, like,
If you restrict the dynamic range, it'll keep people tuned in longer.
Right.
And so I feel like that's the point he was trying to make about why you should use vinyl, is because it's like, well, there's a limited dynamic range, instead of just being like, or you could artificially limit your dynamic range. You know, the way the loudness war has done it.
Right. Well, so part of
That thing you just got done railing against.
right. So part of the thing with the loudness war, because he's talking about how it's people removing dynamic range, etc. And then he's like, but on vinyl, you know, you gotta analog master it, and then you get the dynamic range back, and then you're like, I wanted to be like, oh, excuse me, why don't you just like mix and master it like without ruining the dynamic range? in the digital format,
you just
which
don't
you already
squash it?
said has 3 times as much dynamic range.
He also said that it had a better stereo soundstage.
Right. He was going listening to it. He was like, stereo soundstage, don't even get me started. So much better with digital. Like, what are you doing? I'm so confused. He kept being like, he had no game plan because he was just like, we're going to talk about great vinyls and it's all going to make sense. And then he was like, yeah. I mean, I'm sure most people there weren't as confused or amused
No,
as
that
us.
was the other thing was everyone seemed to be taking it like it made sense.
Right,
And it made me think back. I had an argument on the internet the other day with this dude about why fan frets are terrible, and it quickly became apparent that like he didn't know what words meant or how
Yeah,
discourse
so
worked. So I just disengaged.
Here's what I wrote that includes like a partial quote. So I wrote down, but now that we're back to vinyl and we have 1/3 the dynamic range, we quote have dynamic range again. Like what? Like,
What?
Right, because
Right.
that's what he was basically saying. He's like, but now with vinyl, we got it back, and I'm like, you got 1/3 of it back because you already established 3 times as much dynamic range.
Right. Well, and that's the other thing was he was talking about like, oh, you know, vinyl's hot right now. Everybody wants to do vinyl. I go, you know who doesn't want to do vinyl? Classical musicians, because that was the whole thing. Like back in the early '80s, right? The very first CDs and then the very first SA CDs were classical recordings because that was the thing. It's like that. When you actually, you know, hearing the articulation and everything really matters, and the dynamic range is actually there. It's traditionally been in classical music, and I've had this problem, you know, sending like this is why I have to do all my own mixing and mastering now, is because I would send stuff out, and I'd be like, pretend like you're mixing classical and leave the dynamic range intact, and I would get it back squashed, and I was like, I literally. I don't know what else I can say to you.
Yeah.
And people just squash stuff. Meantime, if you were to send this stuff to a classical engineer, they'd be like, "What do you mean? What do you mean mix? Like, why are there 48 tracks for 6 instruments? You know, like they'd be like, "What do you like?" It's just like,
Yeah.
like no one gets it. And then so to stay with the format bit, there's so the dude from Mutoid Man was talking about, he's like, yeah, you know, back when I had my first job, my paper route when I was 13, 14, he's like, you know, there's all these, you know, albums that I would just listen to like every day, and so I know them like inside and out.
On his
he's
Walkman.
like, on my Walkman, right? My headphones on my Walkman, you know, on cassette, and he's like, and just when I listen to him now on Spotify or whatever, I don't have that same emotional response.
You said, or even on vinyl, which is how you know that he's not talking about like, he's specifically saying it doesn't sound like my shitty old tape player.
Right, and so it's like this. So I felt like this really got at the heart of what the argument was it's a fetishizing of nostalgia,
Yes.
right? It's this
Yes.
idea that like, well, this is the way I grew up with it, and so that's the way I want it to be. Right?
Yeah.
And again, this is going to be this whole idea about what's real and fetishizing what like you grew up with. It's like no, just that it doesn't have to be that way. Like this stuff, people don't just invent stuff
Right.
hoping that you buy it because you're curious, and then the industry doesn't all just adopt. It's like, no, this stuff is literally better.
Yeah.
It's like, just because some people decided to, like, again, like I was just done saying, I have to do all my own mixing and mastering because I don't want to get my shit squashed.
Yeah.
Like, I'm able to make that decision. Like, why does everyone else feel like, oh, they squashed it, I guess that was what we wanted, but that's what we got.
Right.
And like, it's like, no, you have a choice. Like, your choices are pay someone to do it the way you want it, pay someone to do it the wrong way, or do it yourself. Like
Yeah.
you have the power. Like it was like, it's as if they were like, well, since everyone squashes everything, you're handcuffed to squashing stuff if you do it on CD. But if you trick them
Right, yeah.
you need a vinyl
That's
master.
exactly what it was like. He was saying, like, in the digital realm, if you don't compete in loudness wars, you don't compete at all. But if you go on vinyl, then people want it to have dynamic range. It's like you, but again, I wanted to be like, excuse me. I was really seriously like, if there was a Q&A, I was going to be like, hey, I have a question. So, why don't you just leave the dynamic range in the digital recording
And then be done.
where you said it has 3 times as much dynamic range, and then that'll sound better.
Yeah.
And you don't need to buy a large mechanical device.
No, it was insane. Everything he said, basically
It's like
was
it's,
the
you know what it is?
problem is behavior, not technology.
You know what I just realized? The exact parallel that I wasn't connecting in my mind is it's this one goes to 11. Why don't you just make 10 louder and then have that be the loudest one? Well, this one goes to 11. It's like, yes, thank you, Nigel. That is exactly how I felt about it. Why don't you just make the CD sound better? Because it can. And okay, so I don't remember the exact. I think it was. Oh yeah, he was complaining that people weren't using their analog mastering studio, and that's why I was like, I want to go in. He's like, you should. Oh yeah, he was saying like you really should consider like if you really want your stuff on vinyl, you should really consider just recording to 2-inch tape and shit like that. And I was like, yeah, I'm gonna come in with like my iRig and my iPhone and be like,
yeah.
All right, where do I plug my iPhone in, bro?
Your 808 into
Right.
2-inch tape.
Yes.
Like, yeah, it was this. And they had this whole thing. They're like, and this was insane. This was so insane. So they had this whole thing about everybody uses the same fake amp and the same snare sample.
Right.
He goes, any band that gets signed, it's because they get signed because they have something unique. I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's the exact opposite reason of why most bands get signed. And
Everyone sounds the same, but if you get signed, you're definitely unique. Except all those bands on the labels also sound the same.
right, they all sound the same.
Yeah.
And it was just like, what are you even saying, dude? It was bizarre.
So here's another good contradictory bit they had about vinyl versus basically like Spotify and whatnot is, so here's a classic one about vinyl, which I understand the spirit of the argument. Okay, okay, I'm skipping ahead. They talk about how vinyl makes you listen to sides, right? It makes you sit down and listen to the music, and you can't you can't be on your bike with your turntable. Yeah, no shit. One of the reasons that it's not a great
people
format.
stopped buying vinyl.
But here was the other thing. I was like, why don't you just put on your digital music and then sit down and listen to it?
Right.
Which I do all the time.
Right. No, me too. And this, again, to go back to the thing, the entire talk was the problem's not the technology, it's the behavior. And this was the exact same thing. But there's a whole nother aspect that you forgot was they talk about, oh man, this is so painful. So they're right, this thing about like, well, it forces you into this one behavior, which clearly you don't have enough self-control to just, but it's also clearly superior, so you're just a stupid idiot. They're talking about like the whole loudness thing is being related to skipping, like
right,
in the playlists.
Yeah.
And they're like, your stuff's gonna be in a playlist, so it needs to be loud. And I was just like, wait, so like, and again, so then that was the thing about like, well, that's why you should just make a completely different mix and format and just assume like basically, yeah, you have to do all the work twice because your fans are idiots, and so they're either going to listen to 15 seconds of the song in their playlist, in which case it should be squashed and loud as shit, or the serious fans are going to sit down and listen to it on vinyl. And you're like, what about your serious fans who aren't idiots? Right. They're going to sit down and listen to it on digital,
And then it'll sound like shit.
Yeah, and it was like,
and along with that, Mutoid Man, I'm just gonna call him Mutoid Man from now.
yeah.
He was like, the contrast to that being that with Spotify, the music never ends, right? They'll just keep playing.
Oh, yeah.
So when an album ends, instead of being like, oh, that album's over, and so you can like sit and reflect on it, it keeps playing music. Which frankly, I to the tiniest degree, I've found that annoying, where I'm listening to an album and it ends and then some other random shit that isn't, he was like, and then they give you another metal. Like, no, it's always for me been like random shit that was like related to the word I looked up.
Yeah.
But more importantly, you could press stop on your device and like it'll stop. Like it's not gonna like play music forever and you can't stop it.
Oh yeah. Well, he said, he goes, I wrote this down. I'm drawn to albums. I get more done. Again, basically implying that like it's background noise,
Right.
like, which again, like I'm not an old. I understand that this is the capacity,
Not old.
the
totally
capacity
woke.
in which a lot of people listen to music, and I'm more than totally okay with that. If that's how you consume music, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But aren't we sitting here like having the discussion about the vinyl? Like, it didn't make sense. Like,
Yeah.
thematically, nothing made sense.
Yeah.
And then he went off on this weird bit about how they're like, with vinyl, it's just different. There's
Yeah.
a physical relationship between the needle and the vinyl. I have news for you. There is a physical relationship between the tape head and the magnetized tape. There is a physical relationship between the hard drive platter and the head reader. There is a physical relationship between the memory cell and the chemical state. Like, all of
The
these
laser
things,
and the CD.
Yeah, the laser and the CD.
Yeah.
They all have a physical relationship. This one is a different physical relationship.
Yeah.
One that gets worse over time and requires maintenance.
That was another thing too. They went on some weird shit about how like they promised us CDs would last forever, but they don't. But vinyl does. Like, wait, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Remember why they were promising that? Because vinyl didn't.
Yeah.
Because just using it causes wear.
First of all, it doesn't. Second of all, so the thing about CDs lasting forever, this is actually a super valid point, and there's a very real problem in that the Library of Congress actually has a bunch of data stored on optical discs, because it's not just CDs, DVDs, Blu-rays, whatever, that are having problems because they're blowing up. But this is why anyone who's ever run an organization with data that's important, say like history of stock market transactions, or any bank that has like the history of all the accounts, you store the data in multiple places and with checksums, and then what you do is occasionally you have an error correcting like sweep, and then you move the data to newer like storage. But anyway, like it's this weird thing where they're like this stuff's so serious, right? It's art, it's so serious. But we know you're an idiot and you're not gonna take care. It's just like, some of us take care of our shit.
Yeah.
Like, some of us care.
And he was talking about how the basically the error correction in CD players, and he was like, you know, it allows for such and so many errors before
100 errors per second.
Yeah, before it actually skips.
But that's not entirely accurate.
Right.
But
And
anyway.
also, I think that's also misconflating read errors with like damage, even though it would probably be treated the same way.
It's treated the same way, but it's
again,
actually a whole thing in information theory about how many bits you need to lose before you can correct it.
Yeah. And the again, the other false or not parallel, but it should be a parallel, is he's like, but with vinyl, what? It doesn't like. There's no skipping. There's no hissing. There's no popping. That's error.
Right. There's
Who's
errors,
correcting those errors?
There's errors immediately.
Yes.
Like, you could have a completely silent record, and you're gonna hear all kinds of errors. Like, yeah, it was really.
So like, I went in wanting to just, if there was a Q&A, be like, what's your favorite physical music disc? Just to be like, what do you mean physical music disc? Yeah, because you're fetishizing physical music. But I wish I had Q&A, because I would have been like, I'm confused, but like, just to clarify, what's your favorite physical music disc or format? Because I mean, Mutoid Man's is clearly cassette tape, because he established that was what gave him the most emotional.
Which is a disc. So yeah,
right. But yeah, I was like, what are you trying to? What are you trying to say? I don't. Oh, okay. So here's another.
Yeah, it was very confusing.
Oh, this was funny, because he was talking about if you're doing digital like MP3s and stuff, to put, you know, all the metadata in there so it'll come up in searches and stuff.
He made more arguments for digital tech.
Right. And with that, I was like, that's very good advice. And I wanted to be like, because, you know, someone might Google something just related to the lyrics even, and your song might come up. And I'm like, yeah, and you know where that won't happen? On vinyl. He's like, on vinyl, it's all on there. It's like, but you can't search it.
Oh, yeah, no, right, they talked about, again, going back to an inferior way of doing something, but that they've fetishized, which was, they're like, the liner notes used to be like, that was like your roadmap, man.
Right.
Because then they thanked such and such band. So then you went and got that album, and they were like, and that was just so much cooler than the Never Ending Rabbit Hole of the sidebar on YouTube. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't have to get up, read the liner notes, go to the record store, ask, hey, do you have whatever? And they're like, no, I could order it though. And then 2 weeks later, go back to the record store and spend $13. Instead, the thing's right there, and you click on it, and you get it right away. And this is infinitely better.
Yeah, and also, like, if you want that information, it's usually on Wikipedia. You know, you look it up somewhere else, but you do it via Google, and it still takes 15 seconds. So it's like, if you know how search engines work, it's not that difficult to get the information. And it's not like everyone was necessarily obsessing over those to begin with. Like, there's still plenty of people who, like, especially, you know, you talk about like songs not written by, you know, I mean, occasionally there were some practices where, you know, they would just not list shit or whatever. But even if they were, like, the overall marketing was still gonna overrule any, like, oh, but you know who recorded that? You really gotta, it's important you know who engineered that Madonna record. It's like, nobody fucking knows who engineered that Madonna record.
Except industry people.
Right, exactly. Yeah. But you know what I mean, yeah. So.
Yeah. Right, but and if you want to know, you can Google it.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, it was weird, man.
So that was super weird, but very amusing, very worth going to. And really, yeah, I was kind of like, I wonder, like, what was your point? Oh, it was use our analog studio, because people aren't, apparently.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, people are just buying. I felt like the best advice of that whole thing was go buy used vinyl and stick your label on it, because no one's gonna listen to it.
Yeah.
Which I feel like that's a pretty good transition to the next thing that came up.
Okay,
which was my favorite St. Louis citizen. I don't know if he still lives there, but he's from there. I recently realized this.
Luke?
No.
Oh, Michael. Oh, I thought he was from Detroit.
No.
Oh, that's right. I forgot, because you don't know him, but he's your brother. I forgot. You're right. So, like, this is also a really good example of how, like, people who we like a lot, we are still willing to criticize and accurately address things they say, especially on the internet. And we got a double header.
When you make public statements, like, it's fair game.
This is great. So double Yacht Rock bonus here. Michael McDonald, July 14th on Facebook, posted test pressings for vinyl on the new album, Wide Open. We recorded this project from beginning to end as much as possible in the analog realm. Even mixed to half-inch analog, which is what is represented on these pressings. Must admit, I'm excited to hear these. Just gotta find a decent system with a turntable somewhere in my travels out there. Michael McDonald. What the fuck? He did everything right. He's all in the analog realm, start to finish. I can't wait to hear it. I just gotta find a turntable and a system.
I mean, personally, I think my next release is gonna come out on cylinder, and you're gonna need a hand. You're gonna need a hand crank Victrola, and you know, as soon as I find one, I'll be able to listen to it.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So that's the first one, and then this other one is actually from a while ago, but it's sort of thematically heavily related. Steve Lukather, aka Luke from Toto, he posted this big. I think this is actually a while ago. This post is from 2015, and I'm pretty sure it's quoting a post from earlier. So it's actually a pretty old thing, but it's
recently resurfaced.
Yeah. This is the repost from the College of Rock and Roll Knowledge, which appears to be a site entirely for merchandise with that phrase on it.
It's not even like they're a manufacturer and they make other stuff you might want to buy. They literally just like
stuff with their name on it. All right. I'm just gonna read. It's pretty long, but I'm just gonna read this because it's pretty great. Or maybe I'll read it and we'll pause to respond.
Feel free to interject.
I just want to know something. All this pontificating about how Spotify and the like are the answer and how the artist gets paid, etc. How much, really? Who keeps tabs and accounting? I mean, do you want us to answer that?
There's several organizations that are tasked with doing precisely that.
There's also a lot of just digital automation now because it's easy to keep track of streams and stuff. Maybe I just don't know. Well, yeah, clearly. I don't see any money and have a lot of stuff out there over 35 years of making records. Yeah, but you also have a contract with a record label and it goes to them first. And so they take out.
And also, as he points out, it's a very old contract.
Right.
Right? Which most of those contracts had no language about digital and had no language that said, or any formats that may come about in the future.
Right.
So a lot of those people, it's what we call getting screwed, and the label just takes all your rights for those streams.
And this also reminds me of that Shirley Manson interview on Joe Rogan where she was talking about like what you need the label for, and then she was like, but they do our distribution, and we're like, but you don't need that anymore because like you don't to distribute the digital platform.
To distribute what?
She's like, but yeah. And I think didn't Joey Rogan even say like distribute what? And she was like, well, they're our distribution. He's like, but what does that mean? What do they do? And she was like, they distribute our music. It's just like it was going nowhere. We're like, it's okay. Just don't worry about it.
They email the files to the guy.
But her whole thing, I think, was more like, I don't know, the label sends me checks, so I think we're good. Okay, back to Luke. Have you done the breakdown of what an artist gets per tune on iTunes? Pitiful. Now, if you are with a label, it's even worse because they take a huge share of that. Yeah, exactly. The breakdown after all is said and done for most is pennies. Yeah, but it was also pennies when it was on the radio. Like that's, I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of things are pennies. Like even mechanical, your per track royalties. Anyway, too many people can make records. Period.
This is
where it gets
terrible.
pretty.
This
like,
is horrible.
Hashtag old.
Because as history has shown, the democratization of things is always superior. This is akin to him being like, with the printing press, not just the government and the church can print things now. Anyone can write a book.
They're teaching women to read and write?
What the right. That's what it sounds like when you say this bullshit, Steve. So you better fucking check yourself.
All right. No catalog artists are made these days. One-hit wonders galore. Sad, really.
I know because think of all the great catalog
Should I be
artists.
reading this in Trump's voice?
Like
no catalog artists are made these days. One-hit wonders galore. Sad.
Such fine catalog artists such as Michael Bolton. Like, do you know how many fucking shit ass catalog artists there were? Dude, like again, you are rose-colored glasses, fetishizing some fucking era that you came from does not make it good. Like, it still sucked. Just because you made a lot of money off it doesn't mean it was superior. Like, dude.
Now record companies don't give budgets like the old days.
Because it doesn't cost $1 million to make an album. I can make an album in my bedroom that literally sounds better than any Toto album from the 80s. Like, listen to Hold the Line. It sounds like shit. Okay? The quality of the recording is not what sold that stuff. And so you don't need a ton of money. Like, you can just do this in your bedroom.
And plus, I remember a lot of examples before this kind of change came around where it was like story after story of them putting way too much money into an album and taking like years to record it. And that's just like all this money into studio time. And it's like, because they didn't like actually write it, because they just do it once you're like a top label artist, they do just pour all this, well, they used to just pour all this money into you, but it wasn't good use of the money because they weren't like go to a place and write it and then go to the studio. They're like, go in the studio, you don't know what you're doing anyway, the producer's gonna figure it all out, so just kind of
I think there was also a big concern was that once bands got big, right, like they would have drug problems, and so they
need to be supervised.
So there were several things. One, you have supervision because it's like clearly there's drugs in the studio, but you have someone who's like, guys, we're here to record. Like, if you play it, like that's it, it's in the can, right? Like, you don't have to get them into the studio. There's no worry that they're gonna die between the time they wrote it, the time they get in the studio. True. Right? Like, it's just like they're like, we got to get this any way we can, so just get them in the studio. but again, it's one of these things where it's like, if you're that drugged out, like, whatever. Yeah. And so then I think that just became a standard operating procedure because they were like, well, we're gonna throw all this money after whatever addicts. Just do it for everybody.
All right, here's another false equivalency coming up. When the great record, they don't get budgets like the old days when the great records were made because they cost money. They want to make money for nothing and own you for life and a piece of everything an artist does. They wanted that back then too.
Right, but keep going.
You can sell 1 million and still owe them.
That's right there. That's the thing. He's like, now he's complaining about the labels. It's like, well, you know why that was the case? Was because you owed them for the money for the studio time because it was in your contract. So the fact
they lent you that money.
So the fact that they're not doing that is actually great.
Yeah.
Because now, when you make an album, you're just at 0. Whereas it used to be, you're at negative a whole bunch when you just made an album. So he's literally just made the argument for why it's better.
Yeah. My 25-year-old son has buddies who have platinum records living in a one-room studio apartment. Broke. Well, yeah, I mean, that was implied, but I thought it was another, like, sad tag. Sad. Of course, back then... Why does he put then in quotes?
I don't know.
Record companies cared about music and nurturing artists for a long-term career and long-term money.
I don't think they cared about music. I think they cared about how much money this music could make them.
Yeah, there's, like, plenty of evidence going back to the beginning of the record industry of them just being like, is it a hit? All right.
Well, not only that, just the fact that they whitened up so much black music.
Oh, yeah,
right?
yeah.
It was like, if you cared about the music, they would have just signed the black artists.
Right.
Like, they clearly didn't because they were like, can we find some white kids to play that soul-sounded music?
Yeah. Oh, the blues is great. You there, buddy. Can you sing the blues? All right. Let's see. Sure, they got the lion's share, but then they invested, believed, and promoted it, so there was some justification. So he's still saying, like, sure, it was garbage before, but at least
well, no, what
something...
he's pointing out is that the model was different because back then, in order to get someone into the public's consciousness, you had to spend a bunch of money. So once they've done the upfront work, they just want to keep getting return on that investment instead of doing it again. But now it's like, well, you can just throw some shit up on YouTube and see what sticks. It's like, again, it's democratization.
Yeah. Now it's beats and how many Facebook hits or YouTube hits you get. Facebook hits? I guess, kind of. All which either make no money or short-term dog shit money with no real way to account for it and truly suck for the most part.
Right, but as you pointed out, there's actually it's actually much easier to account for stream plays and stuff than radio airplays.
Yeah.
Like, how would you know? How would you know whether or not somebody
that's what I was saying. Like, who's
plays your
keeping
stuff
track
on the radio?
of this? And I'm like, he's like, who's keeping track of this? I'm like, computers?
Right, and there was this whole thing. I think it was called payola.
Oh yeah. Plus, it was all kind of like basically estimates of how much you got played on the radio, and it was also like they decided to play it that many times anyway. So yeah. What the fuck? Oh, so this is his words again.
Be like, that's not your
that's
what the
not
fuck
my what the fuck.
exclamation.
This is
that's
his what the
Luke's
fuck.
what the fuck.
What the fuck? People want to be famous, not good. Like, people didn't want to be famous before.
But that's look. As someone who is very, very good, I can attest right now, I would much rather be famous than good. Because if I just wanted to be good, we wouldn't have a podcast. I would be back in my apartment practicing. But I've done enough of that. And I found out quite definitively what being good gets you.
Yeah.
Not a lot. It gets you the ability to have really awkward conversations with people where you can't really point out that you know way more than them because you just come off as an asshole.
Yeah.
So you just kind of nod when people talk about stuff and then you make fun of them later.
Yeah, I've had some fun experiences with that. Like, just trying to be like, listen,
No, if I have to, I just defer to. I'm like, I have 4 music degrees.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's because
I only have. Well, I mean, one still's
right. But in the absence of like, because it's kind of hard to argue with like, no, there's an accredited institution that claims that like,
right.
But the thing is, like, in terms of guitar playing, I mean, I was really good before I had a degree.
Well, here's the thing.
Like, I know more about music now, but like...
And I've used that, but sometimes people will still be like, oh, like I have a degree in the guitar, and to a certain degree that gets you to a certain point, and they're like, oh, okay, so you must be like reasonably good, but they still don't understand what that entails at all, and so then they're like, oh, so like, can you play like whatever crap? And I'm like, did you not... I just said I have a degree in playing the guitar, and you asked me if I could play, what, and it was like, that guy doesn't have a degree, and then like also that guy doesn't need a degree because he's rich or whatever, but like,
Right, exactly. Again,
Right.
being famous is better than being good.
So it's just like,
Guy doesn't need shit because he's rich, because he's famous. So,
so
Luke,
please tell your friends about the podcast because we got to get famous.
need some of that fame money.
Yeah. All right, let's see.
Because tangentially, I'm going back to work on Monday.
Actually, the same, but
yeah.
you're getting paid a lot less. So mine's more just for the hangs. It is too easy to play pretend pop star now. Yeah, like all the pop stars are doing, with all the fakery and auto tune, time correction, cut and paste, etc. Fuck, most young people don't know how to play a song from top to bottom in the studio in tune and in time and with feeling. Rare.
You should be reading this in Trump's voice.
You're right. Yeah, because he's like rare. I am in the studios. I am in the studios all the time and hear the stories from the producers and engineers, and yet no one cares. That's
Because it's making money.
Right.
That's why no one cares.
Right.
If the goal was anything other than make money,
Yeah.
or it wasn't making money, then people would care.
Yeah. And yet no one cares that so-and-so who sold a shitload of records, and how much is that these days? All right, can't sing or play. They make records for people who don't even really listen. It's background music for people to either find a mate or shake their heads while texting or Skyping or doing other things. Environmental noise for the multitasker.
Right, but the deal is, it's like that the market is. It's like he even says it. He says Mick Records.
Yeah.
Like McDonald's makes tons and tons and tons and tons of money. Tons of people go to McDonald's every day because the goal is to make money. No one has ever conflated McDonald's with culinary prowess. I've never met anyone who was like the modern era of culinary excellence is in crisis. People eat at fucking McDonald's. No one has ever said that.
Right.
That's not the point. Like, we all know it's terrible, and you say like, look, that's dumb, and then you don't be part of it. Do I eat at McDonald's? No.
Right.
But it's like, and no one's forcing you to, dude. No one's forcing you to listen to this shit.
So similarly, if the opposite of McDonald's is like, quality, like artisanal foods, we need to be making artisanal records.
Art?
Yeah, art.
Artisanal art?
Artisanal art. Bedroom to Spotify.
And here's the
instead
thing.
of farm to table.
And you know what?
Bedroom to Spotify.
You know why we can do that? Because it's really cheap and easy to make an album.
Yes.
Because literally anyone can make an album these days. You don't need the record label to fucking ordain your venture, Luke.
Where do I plug my Axe FX in on this 2-inch tape deck? All right. Gone are the days of loving, dissecting, discussing the inner workings of an album. Bullshit.
Unless you listen to our part.
Right, but here's the other thing. That's 100% bullshit, because the top pop shit right now is 100% going at least the sort of facade of high art, like Lemonade,
Right.
Kendrick Lamar, Jay-Z's new albums got all kinds of shit. It's half the time it's just sort of like pretentious bullshit that doesn't actually touch the music at all, because then you're like, oh, beats with a bunch of samples, great. But it's like, no, if you're already famous, that's how you make people think your new album is valuable, is having it be this big, a visual album kind of shit. It's like, so that's actually not true. And people are totally discussing like what every word in Kendrick Lamar's latest album means, which is not as good as the previous one.
Right, but even Rap Genius, it's literally everything.
And
like,
even though half the time it's like a fucking, like what they call subliminals, which is where you're like dissing somebody, but you're not naming him. And it's like, well, that's not actually subliminal, because you still said the thing. Whatever. Let's not get bogged down in words. It's only rap music where the words are supposed to be the whole.
It's more like vague booking, but
right. Exactly. So there's a lot of vague rapping, but vague dissing. But like people fucking spend all their time analyzing that shit.
Right. And the thing is, it's actually your analysis is more visible than ever, because like if we rewind to the 90s.
Right, you could only talk to people in their homes with a turntable. Like, yeah, so that was nice. You could still invite people over. Like, they don't have to come over to hear the music, which actually saves a lot of time and makes it easier for them to hear your music. But if you really want to have like a record club, I mean, actually, people do that online now. They'll do it on Twitter even.
Well, right, because again, like as someone who grew up in Missouri who liked to listen to like atonal death metal, there wasn't anyone I could talk to about this stuff. Like, I had to go on the internet to talk. That's how we met.
Yeah,
was like was because there's this forum. It's worldwide where you can discuss like whatever you want, music or otherwise.
Listen, I wouldn't be listening to Toto as much as I do now if it wasn't for the internet and a YouTube show.
Right.
Come on, Luke.
Correct. Luke, you've got it all wrong, buddy. I'm sorry.
All right. Almost to the end here. Gone are the days of loving dissecting, discussing the inner workings of an album, sitting in silence while it plays, looking at the liner notes and the few photos in the studio, imagining what a magic place it must be to make such music. Gone.
What? He claims to know that people can no longer imagine?
I'm
not sure what he's saying there.
You need a fucking jeweler's eye to read the credits if one even cares. Wait,
no, you don't. Metadata.
Right.
You can change the text size on your computer.
The liners on CDs
on physical music discs.
What are you even talking about?
Okay,
any
honest
digital
question.
text you can enlarge.
So the last time I bought a physical music disc, I actually know the date. It was December 11th because it was at a Berkeley alumni event, and someone there, she was like, "Will you check out my album?" And I was like, "Do you have physical? I'll pay you for a copy of the album because like I think people deserve whatever." But like that was a weird circumstance, right? Like the last time I went somewhere with the intention of purchasing a physical music thing.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Like well over a decade. I ordered I remember I ordered some CDs off eBay in 2007. Like I ordered Vaudeville's Siberian Church Recordings because it was like, and actually that's the kind of thing where I wouldn't be surprised if you couldn't find it on the internet today because like who the hell has that?
Yeah. There was I bought the last Pain of Salvation, which like it's shit like that. It's where like I didn't even know
the one that just with Sebastian Bach on it.
Yeah, exactly. So no longer with the band. He really wrote half the album. Yeah, and so and even that I was like, I don't listen to the CD. It was like either I want a high quality copy and I can't buy like FLAC or Waves or whatever.
Yeah.
Or really just I want to support them, and it's like, and even now I'm just mostly buying T-shirts and shit for that. But it's like, yeah, I mean, whatever. Anyway,
I just want to point out, right? The idea to go back to the thing about you should put the lyrics in the metadata. Yeah. Right. I don't know. Jeweler's eye. No, you hold Control Shift plus, and the font size increases.
Exactly. Let's see. If one even cares, most don't. So if you keep blaming the old antiquated artists who are the only real ones
there
left.
There it is. This idea that there's I want someone
real artists.
This is my challenge to all four of you listening to this episode. I want someone to tell me what a fake band is, what a fake artist is, and what fake music is.
Yeah.
If you can define any of those for me, I would love to hear it, because I sure as shit can't.
Okay, so the only real ones left who may make a great record once in a while, but may be overlooked because the media chooses to care more about who is super gluing meat to their bodies. That's like 5 years old, man.
I don't even know what he's talking about.
Lady Gaga. Oh. But it's like 5 years old. And other ridiculous hype and
bullshit.
This
might actually be 5 years old.
Actually, you're right. To get attention rather than listening hard to the music being made, we might be in a different place.
Because like again, I think we're pretty much on the same page here. Yeah. Like Remedy Lane's like the best rock album ever.
Yeah.
No one has heard it.
Yeah.
Like that's like okay.
Yeah. When we were kids, yes, I will be 108 this year. There were only a handful of artists, and they were great because they had to be.
No, they weren't.
Not true.
There's so much fucking garbage from every era.
Especially when he was big.
No, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. Such great catalog artists as Michael Bolton. Like,
yeah.
Dude, Get a grip.
You could choose not to like some, but outside the teenage fodder, most deserve their success, and no one sounded alike. Also not true. No one. Also not true. Sad. We live in a Mick world that moves way too fast, and now even the drugs suck.
Wait, so this just took a left turn. This has gone from being like a poor argument, but like I understand why you might have this misunderstanding.
Oh, he's talking about bath salts.
To like straight up like I'm old, like get off my lawn.
Right.
Like
it devolves further and further.
It just falls off a cliff into get off my lawn.
And
yells at cloud, get off my lawn.
So his point is, I mean, when I was young and got high, I never got naked foaming at the mouth and tried to eat someone's face off. Yeah, don't do bath salts. Time to put on Dark Side of the Moon and chill. Wait a minute. You mean the album that everybody did acid to? You may not shoot someone's face off, but like still, you can get into some trouble.
Or fry your brain permanently.
Yeah. Have a nice day, and may real music come back and fill our ears.
It never left, bro. Shishedrin is a real thing. I could make the argument that like anything that doesn't sound like Stravinsky. I mean, like,
yeah, that's basically.
I mean, ELP spent all that time playing Bartok. You know, like.
Yeah.
Real music played by real musicians. I don't know.
See, here's what I'm thinking. Let's wrap up our vinyl conversation. Start a separate episode for this not so super groups, just because they're good top. And this is about an hour on this one.
Yeah.
So. All right. So, anything we missed from the?
Probably, but it's just so much. Like I feel like I said a lot of really dumb things on this because my brain just hurts.
Right.
From.
Well, I was like, I mean, it looked like you're just
my
writing down like
points
every.
weren't very well articulated.
I couldn't bring myself
this
to
shit
write
makes my head
down
hurt.
every dumb thing the guy said because I was too busy laughing.
I was in disbelief. I had to write it down because I was like, "There's no way I'm gonna be able
just
to keep
recorded it.
track of all this." Right, I know, but like didn't really realize.
Next
that
time we go to a
until-
thing like that, let's bring a little like mic for my phone or something. Or I'll just bring the Zoom recorder.
I have a handheld recorder too.
Yeah. All right. So hope you guys like this episode. Like and subscribe or whatever, and let us know what your favorite physical music format is,
and real musicians,
and what real musicians
real
are,
music is,
and what real music is. Please let us know. Send us comments or comment on Facebook or wherever. All right, I'm turning it off now.